Good evening to all those who have joined us, and a very warm welcome to Dr. Pandey. This is the second in the talk series that Dr. Alok Pandey has so graciously agreed to conduct for us. 2 weeks back, we heard Dr. Pandey talk about the aim of life. It stirred many questions in our minds, while it quelled some of them. That is the beauty of these sessions. Today, we would hear Dr. Pandey talk about something very, very relevant to the times. How to convert an adversity into an opportunity. Without much ado, let's move on to today's session. Over to you, Dr. Pandey.
Namaste. So, let me start with a quote from Sir Winston Churchill. He said very interestingly that pessimists see difficulty in every opportunity, and the optimists see an opportunity in every difficulty. So, I have often seen this, mindset that there are people, even if the doors of the heavens are opened for them, they will start counting all the difficulties that they are going to experience when they enter into that zone. And on the other hand, there are people whom, when there is a, difficulty, they start looking at how they can play with this difficulty and spin it around and turn it into an opportunity. So, but before we go to that, let us first follow a simple process when we navigate through life and its various challenges. So the very first thing, which often in counseling, because I encounter this, people come with various problems. The very first thing is right perception. That's why you see sometimes it helps to talk to somebody else who is not caught up in the problem. Of course, one should be careful whom one is speaking to, but it's because by the very fact that we speak to someone who is not caught up emotionally, it tends to objectivize the problem. So, right perception means understand the problem rightly. What does it mean? Say, for instance, I'm talking of a very recent example, somebody who was going through a difficult pain in a relationship. So, usually we end up with a blame game, complaint game. I have this problem, I have that problem, that person has this problem. So the usual thought was that, is there something wrong with me? Because there were feelings of rejection, or it was about the other person, that the other person is very bad, horrible. So this is how people go through, and there are all kinds of advices. So the first thing to understand is that this, which is happening in your life or our life, whatever event is happening, is it something unique to us? Is it an individual problem, or is it a cosmic problem? Now, in one of the mother's writings, very beautiful, she touches the core of the problem. When she says that why there is suffering in life, she says suffering comes in life because of the very nature of imperfection of matter. She has got into it. As long as matter is imperfect, as long as life based on matter will remain imperfect, as long as matter is imperfect. The human body has certain limitations. It allows a certain kind of thoughts, doesn't allow other kinds of thoughts. So she has taken this perception to the extreme level, that where is the root of the problem. The second level, when we perceive rightly, as I said, we understand that it's not just an event happening in my life. There was recently a lot of, as you said, recent times, there are a lot of people having death, disease. So once someone came to me, 75-year-old person, and he said, sir, I'm very afraid of this COVID. So I said, what is your fear? He said, what if I die? I said, so is it first time happening on the planet? No, look. Is it that I'm the first person who is going to die? COVID or no COVID, death has been there. Is disease the first time happening to me? Why I'm saying this? Because normally what we are doing is, we are really not solving a problem. In fact, solving a problem is a wrong word. The right word is problem is a opportunity for growth. Now what we are doing is we are doing patchwork. Oh, there is COVID. So let's take this very example. There is COVID, so let me find all the ways of protecting myself. So I use a mask, which is good. Please don't misquote me because the regulations, one must wash my hands, everything. I must do sanitize. Yet, COVID, if it has to enter, it will enter. So, what is the real problem? The problem is not the illness, not the COVID. The problem is fear. And if I keep fear within me, today it is COVID, tomorrow it will be Ebola, or yesterday it was Ebola, tomorrow it will be some other, and life will be plagued with all kinds of diseases. Now, do I want to live my life under perpetual fear and temporary ways and means of, preventing it? I mean, I remember there used to be it used to be a joke amongst us when we were doing psychiatry, that there are people who are hypochondriacs who come and complain all kinds of things. I have this problem, I have that problem. And it continues. So once I read a little joke there, it was very interesting. I mean, that finally a hypochondriac writes on his epitaph, when he goes down the grave. He says, see, he dies at the age of 80, but he has written his epitaph at 40 years of age. So at 80, when he dies, that epitaph is put up on his grave. So what is the epitaph? It says, see, I've been telling you for the last 60 years that I have an illness. Now, is this 60 years? One is living with this idea of illness. Now, is this the kind of life we want to lead? Problems, temporary solution, problems, temporary solution. In this context, somebody asked the mother, she gave a very wonderful answer. Somebody asked the mother that, mother, why are these measures? Sometimes we see in the ashram there are filters. Sometimes we see that mask, sanitization, etc. People often quote, oh, during mother's time also there used to be no bath and all these things. Now when mother was asked this question directly, she said, my child, it depends on the level of consciousness on which we live. So if you are in the physical consciousness, you need to use physical means. And since, he goes on to say, since most of us, even here, most of the people even living in the ashram, are living in the physical consciousness, therefore they have to use physical means. But what we must know, which is what we know here, is that there are other means by which we can protect ourselves. This is the first knowledge that we must have. And secondly, the second knowledge we must have is that it's not enough to just know it. We are moving towards that and we must move towards it. It may take long time, that's fine, but we must have a clarity about the goal. So right perception includes everything. Second aspect of right perception is that, is it something so important that our life depends on it when we use the word difficulty? Now, let me take an example, which I often use. I have to go to place X. And on the road, I find a man with whom I get into an argument, discussion, debate, fight, quarrel. Now I am losing time. I have to reach. I give this example. Ashram is closing at 6:30 p.m. and I get into an argument and discussion. So ultimately, I missed the real thing. So the mother gives a very interesting example. She says, step back and see the things that we value right now as so very important. Are they really important? In other words, we must in our life make a priority list. Lot of people experience lot of unnecessary difficulties because they don't have a priority list. So in priority list, there must be one thing which is most important to me, which I cannot sacrifice. This is something fundamental. It's like the very goal of life. Then there are things which help me towards that goal of life. But eventually, we can find a way. And finally, there are things which are there in life. We are happy if they are there, but they are not my top priority. Now, this lack of prioritization of things in life brings a lot of needless suffering, pain, even adversity, because there is something which is going to go away. We are thinking it is an adversity, but actually it's an opportunity. That famous story of Nur Jahan, that there is a Chinese mirror and it's broken. It falls down when a maid is, cleaning it, and it breaks. And this maid is in tears, shambles. She goes and stands in front of the empress and says, Shisha hai Chin shikast. The mirror from China is broken. And now she has hung her head that next, the sword or what is going to come. And she ponders for a while. She's a deeply spiritual lady, and she says, Khub shud, very good. So what is this very good? She is not sure whether it's sarcasm or says khub shud. Samane khud bhi ni shikast. That which was flattering my ego is gone. Now this can happen when you are clear about the goal. Otherwise you think it's an adversity. Another very interesting way is that, I'm just speaking of some of the strategies, that see, when the river knows where it has to go, so what does it do? It goes, meets a mountain, it doesn't keep fighting with it. It just circuits around it. There's a very interesting river in Ujjain, Shipra Nadi. So, it goes around like this. It's very interesting to see that river. And there are many rivers like that. Look at Brahmaputra, how it goes through the mountains. Eventually, it finds its way to fall into the sea. It knows where it has to go. It goes through everything. So when we know the goal, one of the big problems of life is that we don't know the aim. We don't know the goal. We don't know where we have to go. So everything we start fighting. Everything we start quarreling. Everything we start, I often use this example. Take another example of career. Somebody wants to become a doctor. And so the person is applying for a lot of courses, examination. And as we know, it's not because exam is tough or there are some exceptionally brilliant people. I don't believe in that. I believe that, not everything is meant for everyone. We must follow our own swadharma, which is what the Gita says, that swadharmo nidhanam shreya paradharmo bhyava. When you follow the swadharma, what you are meant to do, it doesn't matter. Success or failure are never the original script of life. So here there is a example that somebody tries for medicine and, allopathic medicine, does it 2 times, 3 times and fails. So people come like that. So I ask them that, well, what do you want to become? So doctor. So why do you want to become a doctor? So if it is, see, one group is, I want to earn money. You have 100 ways of earning money. Find a way. The second is, I want to, doctors are next to God. There are many ways you can become next to God, though it's a damn dangerous thing to try to become God. If somebody tries to put you in that position, be very humble. Don't take it to your head. And the third thing is, I want to heal people because I'm moved by compassion. So then I reorient them. I say, okay, you want to be a healer. So why do you believe that you have to become a healer? Because you have to become an allopathically qualified doctor. Ask of allopathically qualified doctors, and though people have put them on the pedestal, the fact is it can be very frustrating. Because there are challenges where you don't know saving the life of a patient is better or to just let him go, because with all the technological advances. And many times it can be very frustrating. And a healer is different from just a allopathic MBBS doctor. So once we set the goal right perception means this. There is another aspect of right perception. And that right perception is that look at a picture, look at a scene in comparison with the large picture of life. Then we will see how small it is. Like, just now I read in one of the messages, very beautiful message, that every cloud has a silver lining behind it. Go behind, you will discover that. But if you see from this side, it's all cloud. So it's a question of reversing the whole thing and looking at it. So this is one part of it. Then with right perception comes, so larger picture is what? Larger picture is never about success and failure. There is something else which is happening. There is a very nice story which I read, which is very fascinating before we come to the next step. So the story is about a monk, and a young person goes there and says, I want to join the monastery. So the monk says, okay, come and play chess with me. So, those are the ways of, some of these spiritual people. Mystics are not like, okay, you want to join monastery, tell me whether you have read the Gita, the Buddhist text and all. This is never a spiritual man's way. So he wants to see, do you have the quality? So he says, come and play chess with me. You are good at it? He says, yes, I am pretty good. He says, I am also good at it. Let's play chess. So he thinks that, well, if I beat him in chess, I get a chance. So he says, hold on. So the thing is that whoever is defeated will have his head chopped off. And there is a man now sitting with a sword. Now this game becomes very different. Because now it's not just about joining the monastery. It's about, if I lose, I'm going to die. Now it's no more like I can't go back from here. So he has taken a step. So he starts playing. And when he starts playing, he is, beginning to fail. He is beginning to lose. Now he knows he's going to die. So he can't afford to be afraid. So he gathers all his attention and starts playing very well, till he is now beginning to be on the winning side. Now when he is on the winning side, then a thought comes to him. He says, see, if I win, this monk is going to die. And if I lose, I'm going to die. And then he assesses, he says, whose life is more precious? He says, this monk has spent his lifetime in this sadhana, in his yoga. He is giving so much light to people, he can't afford to die. I am, after all, a youngster. Even if I am killed, it's okay. I mean, I can start my life again, but he can't die. So he starts making the wrong moves to lose the game. The moment the monk notices it, he picks up the sword, throws it on the chessboard, and says, game is over. He said, what do you mean? He says, you have the two qualities needed for entering the monastery. One is attention, the ability to concentrate, to turn fear into strength. You see, he was afraid. Now fear can paralyze us. The second is we can turn fear into strength. I am afraid of something, now I have an option. Either to be paralyzed and say, okay, fine, or I take on the challenge head on. That's what we see the Gita starts with. He's afraid. And Shri Krishna says, being afraid and escaping either in the name of spiritual, asceticism and things like that is one kind of response you can give. Other is fight. Life and death is there. You may win, you may lose. You may live or you may die. But at least you have played the game nobly. Because this is your Swadharma. So, she says, first quality, that you changed fear into an opportunity to take on, fight, changing fear into the response where you take the adversity. And you may win. It's not that every time one may win, you may fail. But to fight nobly, and even if you fall nobly, there is a grandeur in that. And to give up, escape, trying to run away, even if you win, you are safe. It's not it's an ignoble life. He says the second quality you have is compassion. That even if you are capable, you still value the life of others more than your own. So you see the whole perception has to change. The way now why we have this perception, because of ignorance, collective suggestions, habits. We are taught from birth that you are a percentage, you have to do this, you have to have that to be happy. Now because of all this, our entire perception is distorted. And that is where we need to correct our perception. That's a whole exercise in itself. And I have just spoken some hints. It's a whole world in itself. Then there is a right understanding. What is the right understanding about our life? Mother says very interestingly, she says, people want to be immortal. And then she laughs. She says, but I have gone into their consciousness and seen when they say we want to be immortal, they want everything in their life, all the relation, everything to continue as it is. So when they say immortality, but she says that cannot be. Why it cannot be? Change is the nature of life. This is the right understanding. Those who cannot embrace change are always afraid, terribly worried people. What if things will change? They will change. Take it that they will change. The very body changes. Everything changes. But we must understand that change doesn't mean bad. Because things change, therefore we have a chance for progress. Otherwise, we are stuck in our comfort zone. So this right understanding implies first that there is change, and second, that life is a field of progress. We put the cart before the horse and we say life is meant for happiness. So we live as terribly afraid people, and everything that takes away my happiness, I regard it as a threat and an adversity. But something which has come to take away my happiness means that it has shaken my comfort zones. But precisely because it has done that, it has given me an opportunity to reinvent and reconstruct myself. There is a very interesting bird, I'm sure everybody has heard, phoenix bird. And the mother gives its example. Now, this is a mythical bird, and I love this story of the bird. It is a bird that comes from the heavens, it comes from the skies, and enters into fire. And as the Egyptian story goes, it comes once in 1,000 years. It's about the avatar basically. It's nothing else. It's their every age of mankind has its conception of avatar. They don't use the word. We should not be bound by words. So it comes, enters into the flames, and then from the ashes it rises up. And it rises up, and now it's got a more glorious and golden body. This very beautifully described in Savitri in one line. A god come down and greater by the fall. Another line, the Godhead greater by a human fate. Now, you see, if we look at it like that, imagine when, great beings have wanted to take birth upon earth, have plunged into this inconscient, this darkness. If there was ever a ghosty of gods, And they would have said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Don't do it, don't do it." You are embracing adversity. What would this being say? I am embracing change. Why are you embracing change? Because I am embracing progress. What do you mean by that? He would say, "See, I am in the status of the gods. But I want to rise further. You guys are all static. You don't progress. You are in a typal world. You are happy with whatever you have. But I'm sick and tired of this static state. I want to go beyond." But the paradox is that if you know, his story is very interesting, that gods, if they have to progress, they have to take a human body. Ever felt ki ye kya hai? Why is this? Why is such a law? It's a strange thing. We all know about it. We have read it. Now, one reason is that because in human body there is something which is like a catalyst for progress, which the gods don't have. That's why in Kathopanishad we have, when Nachiketa asks Yama that, "Tell me the secret of immortality," he says even gods don't know it. So why gods don't know it? Because they don't have it. Now this catalyst for progress, why is it found in such a despicable state? Precisely because when there is a tremendous adversity, when we are compressed from every side, that's the time when we can bring out our greatest strengths. Somebody, as Sri Aurobindo says in one of the aphorisms, never take the leading of someone who has never failed in life. A true leader is somebody who has experienced failure, who has experienced bitterness, who has experienced fall. See, there was a very nice video long back I had seen, and I strongly recommend to people who want to, let's say, be healers. And it's called The Wounded Healer. I think now a number of parts have come. But when it came first time, and it says very beautifully that somebody who has not felt the pain of one's own pain, how can he ever understand the pain of others? So I use it like often humorously when sometime when you are not well and people say, "Are doctor, you are not well." I said, "Yes, I am on a crash course." Crash course of what? Crash course of empathy. What do you mean crash course of empathy? See, doctors are very insensitive to people's pain because they have, over a period of time, they take it like, "Arey kya hai, headache hai, dolo le lo." But for a patient, it's not just a headache. It's like a brain tumor sitting on his head. So now it happens, doctors do sometimes become very insensitive. It's because there is a knowledge that, well, it's not as serious as you think. So sometime when you go through it yourself, then you understand. Then you will never tell another person, "Oh, it's a migraine. It's okay." Because you know what it means. It can be pretty frightening to somebody. So you will then explain, you will, take all the pains to make the person understand, reassure. So everything in life, when we look at it from the right understanding, the first important thing is that life is a field of progress. Once we understand it, then everything can make us progress. Even if there is a poem of Sri Aurobindo, "To the Sea." I'm sure he must have seen the sea here and then, got it. Like he says, "Oh sea, you are there and majestically, and I am coming to match myself with you. Let me see who is vaster, who is mightier." And then he gives an example. He says, "I want to ride your waves like holding a lion's mane." And then he says, "Oh, you say you will drown me and put all your weight on my chest." Then he says, "I will still resist." It's a very powerful one of those places where Sri Aurobindo says, if you need to fight with your arms. If not arms and legs, then with speech. If you cannot, then with your will, faith. These should never die till the last moment. Why? Because doom is not a close, a mystic seal. Death is a passage. Fools to annoy. So it is not a close. Even if the one maintains the unseen decree, thy refusal is written in thy credit page. For doom is not a close, a mystic seal. The spirit rises mightier with each defeat. Its godlike wings grow wide with every fall. Its splendid failures sum to a victory. It's the other way around. Sometimes our victories sum to a failure. Oh, I did this. Some people are, full of all these. When people show, you see this reversal of understanding about life. There are people who at the end of the day are busy displaying these many medals, these many degrees. You know why? Because somewhere inside they have felt that I have failed in life. Only such a person will display all these things. But somebody who has actually won the game of life in the true sense, who has lived his own life, We'll never bother about all this, whether people appreciate, don't appreciate. So, right understanding is to understand that we are here for progress. And where is the end of this progress? There is no end of this progress. Even on deathbed, if we make the choice of not conceding to death, it doesn't mean that, we may not die. Physically, we may die. But we are going with this idea that, look, death, you stared into my face and I stared back. And I said, look, I am calm. Try to scare me. And what did I see? I saw behind death, this is a mask. I saw my beloved's face. Now, when we live with this approach and attitude, then even that last moment becomes a means for progress. That's how Shri Krishna puts it. What does he say in the Gita? If all your life you have remembered and offered your life to God, then what happens? When you are at the last moment remembering me, it's like a leap, because it's an intense concentration of consciousness. So this is the right understanding. Then right response. Right response is equally important. Now, what is right response? Actually, if we understand everything more or less right perception, we'll make a right response. Right response is based on the goal we have in front of our life. And it's understood that there are responses which take us down further and further, which make us cramped up, small, narrow. Fear is the worst kind of response in the face of any situation. And what is the greatest response? Just the very antidote of fear. And that is faith. It's a tremendous response. People don't understand the power of faith. It means that I have faith. One place Swami Vivekananda says, have faith in yourself, faith in your destiny, faith in God, faith in fate. Why are we living with so much of fear all the time? Fear is a response which may preserve your body but damage our soul. Faith is a response which makes our soul glow, even if in the bargain, though it creates the best conditions for the body either to recover or to depart, either ways. But even if it keeps your body for a moment, you see, I did all the right things. All the right things were just the wrong things. Because imagine going finally one day and say, I preserved myself. Look here, God. I have preserved myself and lived to 90. Following all the right rules that way. He will say, but you are perfectly useless to me. You never took the challenge of life. So, the adversity, people shrink into a little hole, and there are others who take it as a challenge. And what happens when we take life as a challenge? It helps us to grow stronger. That's the game of life. It's not about success and failure. Often I give this example when two teams play. For the sattabaj, it is success and failure. Ask the team players, momentarily success, failure. After that, what happens? They're all in the lobby sitting, okay, this is yet another game. And what is happening in the process? They're growing as human beings. They're growing in strength. They're growing in stamina. Even a player who has lost most of the times, let's say in a football match, of course he may not be kept, that's different. But he has grown in terms of his capacity, at least in his lung capacity. So this idea that I am playing because I must win or I am afraid of losing, it's a lower motive. This motive works in ignorance. This is the motive which works. But a higher motive is that I am playing it so that I can awaken my body consciousness. I can open it to the divine. So the right response is not about doing different things. Often people think that great people are those who do different things. No. Great people also do the same ordinary things. Whatever greatness means, by the way. But great people do ordinary things in an extraordinary way. And the small people do extraordinary things in the most ordinary way. They're standing before God. And what they're looking for is my little agarbatti, which I'll do like this. God, he's confused. What are you trying to do, sir? I am searching for my nariyal. Why? I want to break it down on the ground. He will say, break it on your head. Your head is the nariyal. That's a symbol. My child, break your head so that I can put some light of liberating knowledge into it. So, they're doing extraordinary thing. You see, prayer is a most extraordinary thing in life. And I'm saying with all these sense behind the words. People say, but we all pray. No, we don't pray. We don't know how to pray. We are afraid. We are bargaining. We are calculating. We are asking things. So we are asking everywhere. You see a typical person who is praying, He will go to politician, he'll go to the policeman, he'll go to priest, everything, Rahu, Ketu, everything. He'll also go to God. And he'll say, by the way, who knows, this may work. I have known atheists who will say, there was a famous example of somebody who was an avowed atheist, but when he had a paralytic stroke, he went to the Loot spring to get the touch of that healing water. So somebody spotted him and said, what are you doing here? He said, who knows? I am a rationalist. How do I know it may help? At the end of the day, it may help. So now, this kind of a mentality where, this is not prayer. Prayer is something which rises from the heart with the certainty that my Lord has heard it. Is there a greater felicity than the divine having heard us? It doesn't matter what he will respond. Now he knows. He may not respond, he may not give me what I have asked. But he has heard it. Very often people say, are all prayer answered? Well, Sri Aurobindo says they are heard for sure. They are answered, but you may not be ready to receive the answer. Because you want one particular answer. Does even a human mother always answer a child's prayer all the time by doing whatever the child asks? No, because heaven's wiser love rejects the mortal's prayer. So pray we must. Prayer it connects us to something much greater. That changes the whole face. What prayer may do, it may not always, let us say somebody is on deathbed, bachalo, bachalo. Now, thing is, you may not escape, but your fear of death may pass away. You may even understand that it's good for me at this point of time to make a change or shift. So prayers, the answer to prayer which comes is an answer from the higher consciousness. It's not an answer from my own state. I want an answer from my own state. I want to pray and I want a particular result. That's not prayer at all. That's bargaining with God. And if you bargain with God, you will be a loser. If He grants what you have asked, why? Somebody asked Sri Aurobindo, why does the divines grant desires when on one side He says, go beyond desires? So He says, sometimes He wants you to learn through the bitter experience. So when God grants prayer, you don't know whether it is a good thing that is happening in your life or not really. So best is, that's why Mother said, best prayer is, say what you want. Nothing wrong in that. We should be sincere like a child, candid. Lord, I want this candy. But tell Him, but you know what? I don't know what it's going to do to me. So take care of all the consequences and the effects. And ultimately, see, this is my prayer. But ultimately, you do what your will is there. And if we do it sincerely, then we will say that life begins to change. Because we are taught somehow this modern mind which has separated God from our ordinary life. So it, says prayer is only for going to heaven and our everyday life is everyday life where your effort. So you see, I often say that there is a very interesting thing in Indian movie and the Western movie. So in Indian movie, the moment a ship is doing like this, a little bit, suddenly you will see everybody starts praying, depending on, every hand is going up and suddenly there is lightning and all that magical effect and suddenly the ship stabilizes. So this is one. Or, if there is evil, some villain doing some all kinds of things and someone prays and there is Trishul comes and strikes and dies. This is one kind of response. There is another wherein, see, in the Western context. In the Western context, if the ship is drowning till the last minute, they are trying to fix the problem. Now, which of the two is better? A little bit of both. Try your hand, but rely on the greater power. This tendency for either all. Because why divine wants us to make the effort? Because effort prepares me for the grace. Effort prepares me for the progress. If everything the divine were to do, we are like marionettes, then there is no progress. Even if He saves my life, He does, by the way. But if He saves my life 10 million times, I will remain the same person. So we do what we need to do. So synthesis of Western and Eastern movie, somebody should make. Where they are doing effort, at the same time inwardly they are praying. So we must do what we have to do and pray. Then the other part is that very often these problems come because of the attitude. So there is a shift in attitude required. What is the usual attitude when there is a problem? We want somebody to blame or somebody to fix. So Mr. Blame It All ultimately is God, poor fellow. Either you have a husband or wife or you have God. One of the two will be responsible for your problems. So, If if you are alone, single, so whom do you blame? You have blamed God. What does an atheist do? He also blames. He says, see, what I've seen atheists actually saying, God doesn't exist. Look at this world. So I've heard somebody say this number of times, close interaction. I said, okay, but you are an atheist. Why are you continuing to blame God who doesn't exist? He said, where do I take out my frustration? So I said, you can take it out on 100 people, but not God. Either you say that God exists and, I blame him. There is some kind of maybe he'll say, ki, my child, try to understand my ways, and I'll tell you why I punish virtue with defeat and why Pandavas have to go through all this suffering. Then, it's a different aspect altogether. So we end up into a blame game and complaint game. So either there is somebody outside me to blame, or there is somebody inside me to blame. So we take two approaches. Both are equally horrible. So one approach is, they are self-defeating. One is that there is somebody outside to be blamed for my difficulties, for my problems, for my challenges. What happens then? I have lost my empowerment. Because now I am waiting for somebody else to change. And people have spent lifetimes trying to change their spouse, and then they come, he doesn't change. I say, but who told you that he will change? Is it written in any book that somebody will change because you want him to change? Nobody changes. Nowadays, even children don't change, let alone spouse, fully formed human being. He's not going to change. Accept or don't accept, that's up to you. But you want him or her to change unless there is deep, intense love, and that too will be momentarily, because that kind of love which can really completely plunge oneself is rarest of rare things. So let's talk about the common thing. Or else they end up blaming oneself. Oh, I am bad, I am horrible, I am this thing. They don't help. As far as circumstances are concerned, outside, that circumstance means people. You can't change them. So what we can do is we can change ourselves. So how to change ourselves? Look at it rightly. So there is very beautiful one serenity prayer which I learnt just immediately after my MBBS. Somebody gave me that prayer, and for a long time I had it. 13th century prayer. Oh Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So there are things we cannot change. We can't change others. So it's no point complaining, blaming them. But what I can do is I can change. How I can change? I can shift my attitude. Instead of putting all my expectations from one person, and it's a big stress even for the person. Poor fellow, he'll break down. You want the person to be Mr. Everything and, everybody and, no, you shift it to the right goal, right focus. And many people, turn to God knowing that, life's nature is like this. Of course, it should not be a very thaka hara manushya, because thaka hara manushya is good for nothing. But you understand the nature of life, that, probably you are expecting too much. It's a human being. He will break under the burden of your expectations. So this is where, instead of complaining and blaming, we learn. And we discover there is something within us, and we make an attitudinal shift. And one beautiful example of that is the story of a sheikh who is passing through a desert, and he has the court philosopher along with him. And this court philosopher, while they are going through the desert with all the caravan and retinue, they spot a man sitting under a palm tree, and who is eating something. So he is curious that who is this madman in this heat, in this desert, sitting there, and what is he doing? So the court philosopher knew that he's a mystic. So he tries to say, sir, he is of no consequence. Because court philosophers want always to be in the limelight. If he discovered that there is a greater mystic, there is a real mystic, I am only a pandit, then my job may be threatened. So he is feeling threatened. But the sheikh insists, no, let's go, I am curious. So they go there. So he asks, oh, who are you? He says, nobody. Okay, Mr. Nobody, what are you doing? He says, can't you see I'm eating gruel? So the court philosopher by now is, under a lot of anger. He says, sir, he turns towards his master and says, he's a fool. So he says, yeah, but what do you mean? He says, then he turns to the fakir, mystic, and says, what a fool you are. If only you learned how to please the king, you would not have to eat gruel for the rest of your life. And the mystic replies, I think you are a greater fool. What do you mean? If only you learned how to eat gruel, you won't have to please the king for the rest of your life. Now you see, learning to eat gruel is much simple. So it's like setting your priorities right. Maybe I had wrong priorities. And when I have wrong priorities, I am bound to suffer. If I am attached, at one place Sri Aurobindo says, one of his letters, he says, blows do not come to you because there is something wrong in you or because you have done some sins, etc. This idea of sin and virtue and punishment and karma and justice has completely taken away from us the urge for progress. And guess how? Because, whenever anything happens, you say, "Arey, ye to hamara karma hai, so I have to suffer." Somebody is run down by a truck, and instead of catching the driver, we say, "It's your destiny what to do." This is a completely ignorant idea of karma. Karma is in fact about you make your destiny. Purusharth, what you have done in the past is today. So that means today what you are going to do is going to have an effect tomorrow. So we can change our destiny even if we just take that Purusharth. That's why it is said that when life offers certain things, accept them. Because when you go through it rightly, you can change it. But if you don't go through it rightly, it will come back. That difficulty will pursue us again and again. So there is this need of an attitudinal shift inside and see that maybe I am attached to things which give pain. That's what Sri Aurobindo says in the letter, that difficulties do not come to you because there is something bad in you or evil or, you have committed sin. They come to all human beings. And why do they come to all human beings? He says they come to all human beings because they are attached with things that are in their nature transient. And they are going to pass away. So a great lesson of life, in my psychiatric practice in Air Force, I had written this outside. This too shall pass. That famous story of King Solomon. This too shall pass. This is the great lesson of life. That look, if I get too attached with things, deliberately one may, we know the story of how the divine beings, when they come to earth, because they have come, how the Divine Mother used to attach herself to us. Sri Aurobindo speaks of that. That she would completely identify with us, take our problems on herself, that the divine beings. But ordinarily, when we attach ourselves with somebody, we are bound to suffer because by its nature, it's a transient object and it is going to pass away. Either the value of it will pass away, the joy we are getting will pass away, because it's the nature of earthly life. Now, one proviso to that, in a typical Buddhist setting, we would say that is the nature. But here the mother says, but we are here to change that. But to change it, we must change the very basis of our existence. And that's where we come to the last issue. Now, what is the basis of our existence? If our basis of our existence is ego and its satisfactions, fulfillment of desire, then we can change really nothing. We live with the illusion of change. We are changing this, we are changing that, and it's going to collapse. But if we change the basis of our existence, what is the basis of our existence? Dharma. This world is a divine unfolding. And when we participate in creation with this idea, that this is the purpose of my life, a prayer, a master act, a king idea, no more to satisfy my desire or my ego self, but when we live with this sole intention, the more we are aligned to the divine truth which is wanting to express into this transient anitya masukham lokam bhajaswamam, in this world which is transient suffering world, the more we will help it become better. We want this world to become perfect. We want happiness to abide. We want love to never fade away in human heart, never to die. We want knowledge to be sure, not mixed with error and doubt. We want bliss to be unconditional. We want peace to be constantly there. But the way of that is not through these means that we are adopting. Maybe we are asking for the right things, but in the wrong place. So the way is change the basis of life. The basis of life must be truth. What is that truth? All this desire and all is completely corruption of the original file. The original script of life was never meant for. This is a corrupted file which has come. And it had its purpose. I am not going into that. There's a different discussion altogether. But right now, and desire is a helper up to a point. Ego is a helper up to a point. But a time comes when we have to go past it. We must know that with desire and ego, life will give a mixed baggage. It will be thoda kushi, thoda gum. But if we want it to be always happy, always beautiful, always true, always that love in its resplendent glory, harmony, beauty, all these things that we aspire for, then we have to change the basis. And the basis has to be truth. And what is that truth? First truth, my individual soul truth, Swadharma. Let us live with what we are born to do, not what my neighbors are born to do. Whether they are doing it, they appreciate it, nobody appreciates it, doesn't matter. true success is Swadharmo, Nidhanam Shreya. True success is to lead our own true life, the truth that has been shown to us. And failure is the only failure is not to live by that and amass a whole empire of wealth. True success is to rise nobly, even fall nobly if need be, but following one's highest law of truth. This is the first truth. And the second truth is the divine will that is expressing in creation. So let us live for that. And the more we align ourselves with that, we'll see that every difficulty is an opportunity. Why? Because the divine is everywhere in everything. Even when we are faced with the most seemingly unsurpassable difficulty, that means we have a chance to realize the greatest divinity in that. That's why Mother says that, we are all built in such a way. That's why difficulties, there are outer and inner. What is the greatest inner difficulty? It's called as a shadow. What is a shadow? That which opposes the divine plan in us. It is that point of extreme resistance in us. In others, there are other points. But one's own shadow. Now, why shadow is given? And you can't escape it. Try doing it in any amount of meditation, it will come back. It will hit you. So one day you have to take it head on. So how do we take it head on? We say, shadow, show me the light which is hidden inside you. Why are you coming wearing this mask, O divine beloved? And then you will see slowly that the mask will go away and you discover the wonderful divine presence in all things. And when we have discovered thus, right through the heart of the shadow, then we discover Him everywhere. So the path is everywhere because the divine is everywhere. And one who has chosen to live for the sake of the divine will, to manifest the divine will find that however big and I'm not talking of outer difficulty, they are nothing actually, but inner difficulty, because all the difficulties are ultimately inside us. The real adversity is inside us. Success, failure, all this is a corrupted version of something else. But the greatest challenge, the greatest difficulty, the greatest handicap of life may be your greatest opportunity. And let me close with one small story from my clinical practice. So there was a boy who was 14-year-old and his parents had come, lot of depression, so the whole family wanted to commit suicide. So only boy, and he was suffering from a condition, progressive muscular dystrophy. So you are going to die inevitably. I mean, he had already lost functioning of his leg, was with great difficulty he could lift his hand with some support. But he knew that slowly he is going to lose that ability also, and he has to be spoon-fed and eventually it's death. There is nothing you can do about it, It's a genetic autosomal dominant gene and it's death staring in your face. So they all knew, every doctor was saying this. So, they tried ultimately and they came to me for depression. So I said, first I called, I spoke to them, the parents, and I said, see, you need to reorient yourself. And then there was a kind of discussion that you are regarding he's my own son. So you are suffering. You look at it like this, that God has given you an opportunity to help him in the transit. So while he's transiting through you, instead of filling his life and your life with sadness, help him grow as a human being. After all, his soul is still alive. He said, then it was a change of perspective, because one of the biggest problems of life is when you feel you are helpless. So when you realize that you are never helpless till the last moment, there is something which you can always do. And that something is to remember the divine within. So they were totally changed. He said, now how do we do this? I said, you call your son. So next sitting was with the son. I asked him, he could barely speak, but with effort. So I'm cutting that conversation into a smooth flow conversation. But it was, with great difficulty he could articulate. So I asked him, so I can see that, you are naturally, obviously feeling so distressed. He said, yes. I said, but what distresses you most? He says, there are boys my age who can do things which I can't do. I said, yes, but what are those things? He gave some examples. They can cycle, they can climb trees, they can play cricket. And I said, yes, I can understand. So I said, so are there things which you can do which they can also do? Now this boy gave me a shock. I had not expected this answer. He said, I can think. I said, very good. You can think? I said, what else? He said, I can pray. I said, okay, very good. And he literally spoke what is there in that novel, Hermann Hesse's, Siddharth, except for half a sentence. And he says, suddenly, I don't know why he said, he had never heard this before. He said, I can meditate. I said, okay, now you tell me, because you cannot do those things, you have more time for these things. So can you do this better than others? He was paused for a moment. He said, yes. I said, so let's try to think, pray, and meditate. He said, yes. There was a glow on his face. There is something I can do. I'm not hopeless and helpless because I can't move my hands. My brain is still active and my heart is still active. So I started telling him how to, get into I could see that there is some touch of the poet inside him. So I said, why don't you try writing poems? So he started. With great difficulty, he could write. So I asked people to assist him. So with the assistant, he started writing poems. And till 5 years, I was in contact with him. Even when parents got transferred, and he would give a ring on his birthdays or otherwise. And with great difficulty, he could speak. So somebody would say, but he was a happy boy. Why? Because he realized there is something you could do, and surely he was progressing. He was so happy seeing that a poem can be born out of him. So there is always something we can do. It's never a hopeless case. And that something is, if we really consult within, when outside we can do nothing, there's something we can do inside. And that inside is, if we can do nothing else, then we can think, we can pray, we can meditate. And if we can do none of these, at least we can remember and take the name of God. It's not something ordinary. So sometime when there is nothing else we can do outwardly, when Mother had given this, that when people sometimes they grow old and they can't do things with hands, and so one of them had asked Dr. Vishwesharaya. He was head in General Hospital, so he was sharing this with me. He was 90, so he said, what Mother told me. I asked her once that I am not able to do now anything and serve you. What do I do? He said, why, my child, you call my name. That is the greatest service, because you are bringing into this atmosphere forces of a very high order. He said, when you cannot do anything with your hands and feet, do this. There are not many people who can do this. There are a lot of people to run around and do other things, but this is something which not many can do. So do this. So let us live with this great utterance that there is always something we can do. And even when we can do nothing else, the least we can do is to call the name of God. And then we will see that when we are pinned down from every side, what greater adversity can there be? Then a flame can arise in the heart. And in that flame, all that we need to say is, Ma, 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 Ma. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Bhaiya. The perspectives which you have given, it has definitely, I'm sure the way it has opened up new vistas for us. So there are a few questions as usual. So a very pertinent question is that when a loved one is going through a harsh circumstance of adversity, what is the best way to help?
When a loved one is going through a hard circumstance of adversity, what is the best way to help? Basically, these are the things: right perception, right understanding, and then, of course, the right goals, the larger picture, all precisely, the whole package. But at the same time, there is something else we can do, and that is to support him or her through the tremendous energy of love. When we give this goodwill, this love, this prayer for a person who is going through a difficult, challenging circumstance, then we are adding to his own effort. So it's like what we are doing is not just, very often we start analyzing mentally and end up making things worse. A kind of sympathy which is more like a pity also doesn't help. What is needed is, when a person whom we love is in distress, is compassion, not pity. What is pity? Oh my God, you are going through so much pain. Oh my God, why God has to give all this to you? This is making things worse. On the contrary, we must bring in compassion. What is the difference? Compassion comes from heights. It is a strength. It is not a weakness. It helps us to open a door. As somebody said, that you think that all the doors around you are closed. No, some of them are not locked. Just try to open it. So to show this aspect that there is a door which is open and can open, and yes, of course, by the very fact that we love somebody with all the goodwill is itself a very big thing. And I can tell you that, however hard the going may be, if you know that there is a companion with you on the road, it reduces your challenge by half. And when you know that the divine is your companion, then it takes away the entire challenge. That's how the Gita puts it. I have given this exercise to people. Sometimes I tell them that, a lot of depression, that, why don't you make divine your friend? So this was a girl who said, how? I said, no, you you take Krishna as a friend. That's it. And she says, is it? I said, yeah, tell everything to him. You start with this. After 5 years, she was in touch and she said, I'm so thankful because it changed my life. She was on a number of antidepressants and it went away because, she realized that there is a friend. So, what is a companion, love meant for? To be with the person. You cannot always change the things, but the very fact that you know that you are with somebody whom you love, whom you can trust, changes everything. That story of Savitri and Satyavan. Satyavan is going to die. But because he knows Savitri is there, look at the sting of death is taken away. He says, Savitri, Savitri, I want to be in your lap. And he says, maybe your presence itself will save me. And then he closes his eyes and his closing thoughts are Savitri, Savitri. And that changes destiny. So true love, I'm speaking of true love. Loved one is different from really having true love. And if there is true love, if somebody is so fortunate to have one in his life, it can be a tremendous help just by the mere presence. And of course, as I said, prayer, showing the right way, compassion, which understand the causes of difficulties, unconditional love, that, all these are wonderful things which help and keep us going. Yes?
As you rightly said, that sometimes we keep on looking at the closed door that we forget that there are 100 windows which are also open. So another question is that is it possible to live a life without attachment and continue to fulfill our duties as an individual in this world?
To live a life without attachment and continue to fulfill our duties, then one will miss out on something most important in life, and that is love. So, it's okay. We can do it. We can fulfill. There are people who do it, who are purely living in the mind and have a sense of duty and they're doing it. But they miss out on this flaming core. Now, there can be a love which is detached. So that's what I say. There are two kinds of love. One is love which can be detached. This is where friendship is. The friendship is a kind of love where you do everything, but you are detached. So you are there available for a friend when there is a problem, but otherwise life is going on. You don't, you're fine. When you come to know friend is in distress, you may help, you will help to the extent, but it doesn't affect you. So that is a kind of attachment. But on the other hand, there is love. And love goes to the core, completely identifies with the person to the extent that one can and takes upon oneself. Now there is a great joy, it's a kind of sacrifice. So yes, it's possible. A lot of sages live life like that. They are detached and they do their duties because it's prescribed either by the religious text or because it's social convention or because they simply feel that this what will earn me some merit and I can go to heaven. So they are really not attached with people, but they want to earn a merit. So there is a ulterior motive behind it. But what is missed out, one must say, and that is love. So I would rather say that do our duties, but greater than duty is love. And that love can only awaken in the heart if we have learned to love the divine. It is only there that we discover the true source of love. Be as the divine. How does the divine act in this world? Not with a sense of duty. He plunges himself into creation to labor of love to pull it out. Why? Because he loves. So he's not doing a duty that, I have made things, let me do things. Then he will say after some time, I tried my best. That's what duty is about. But you don't listen to me, so what can I do about it? It's not the highest status. Highest status of the divine is that he just unconditionally gives himself to creation. So one can live life without attachment, fulfilling all the duties. But there is a greater state which the mystics know of, and that state is love. Yes.
But one question, another, it's related to this question also, that you said that attachment love is also important for fulfilling a duty. So, we often say that the best love which is given is from the mother to the child. But sometimes while giving love, they become extremely attached. And that attachment, sometimes, it changes into a power game and, it's like, imposing a lot of control. How can...
Yes, so mother's love for a child. Now, first of all, let me once again clarify this love and attachment. There is a love which is impersonal and universal. There is no attachment in it. and yet it is there like light which is radiating and effulgence which is going to all. So there is a love like that. Definitely there is a love like that. And there is a love which can be intensely personal. And that's where we have, even divine. There is an aspect of the divine as a teacher, which is, a kind of impersonal love. But divine as mother, where we see that divine plunges into creation and takes upon himself the burden of everyone. Now this attachment can be an ignorant attachment or an attachment in knowledge. So when I attach myself to, let us say, a mother attaches to the child, this can be completely ignorant attachment. You want to fulfill everything that the child demands. You want to just, you're not really showing the child the way. You are completely only strengthening the ignorance and the bonds of ignorance, which are going to eventually make him suffer. But there is an attachment which is born out of strength and wisdom, where you never lose sight of the wisdom. And while you are attached, you are also bidding the person walk the path and go towards the goal. Let me take an example. Somebody is climbing to the summits. So one approach is impersonality. I stand on the summit or wherever and I say, you see, take that route and this route, and the person falls. I tell them, get up again. This is a impersonal, detached kind of state, where I don't lose my station of consciousness. The other state is ignorant attachment, that I come there and the person says, I am feeling very tired, I want to go this way, I want to go back, I want to fall down. And I say, okay, I am attached to you, so let me. Now this is an attachment to the ego self. But there is another attachment to the soul of a person by the soul of one human being. Then what do you do when a person is feeling tired? You don't say, okay, fine, let's go back. You say, let's rest and let us continue the journey again. So one never gives up and helps one stick to the path and walk towards the heights. So this is the difference. So love born out of truth. But human mothers are in ignorance. So it's not only possession control, but it's sometimes much worse. Children are meant to, बच्चे हैं हमारा बुढ़ापे में सहारा बनेंगे. I have never found a more despicable thought than this one, where children are meant to be your old age ki lathi. I mean, you take a lathi better than have a grown-up conscious being. Or you have people say that I am marrying so that my needs can be looked after. Somebody will cook for me. And I mean, you hire a maid. Why do you want to marry, which is such a beautiful thing? It's an act of love. Even if the person does nothing for you, it's about love. It's not about cooking and taking care of your needs. Are you a little baby that you want somebody to mother you? I mean, this kind of an approach where now mothers can be very ignorant. And take that example of ignorant mother who was Kaikeyi, and even Kaikeyi, by the way. Kaikeyi is this mother of Ravana. If I am right, the name, yes, Kaikeyi. And Kaikeyi, mother of Bharat. So what did they do? Out of attachment to Bharat, the other out of attachment to Ravana, tried to further their ambition. One was so unhappy in his life that, my Lord, my beloved Rama had to suffer because of me, he suffered. And the other Ravana met his own nemesis. So this is the ignorant attachment. Further your ambition, further your this. What is the attachment of love? We see it in the life of Shivaji. Mother Jijabai, right from childhood, she says, you are not born for ordinary things. You are born for the greatest of the great. Look there is a person who is taking this cow. There is a story in the life of Shivaji at 12 years of age. Look here what he is going to do. Look here, this is the kind of rule in which, your dad has to go and do salam in front of, alien invaders. So she prepared Shivaji to face death, but take on the challenge of life. So this is love, which is inspiring, ennobling, uplifting. And here also you are attached. Otherwise, she could have said, look, Shivaji, this is what I want, but basically you look after the kingdom. That is ignorant attachment. So, attachment with full awareness, never losing sight of the goal, with complete wisdom in your heart, and yes, the perfect love is the right kind of attachment. And attachment in ignorance, but that's too much to expect out of human mothers, unless they are yogis. Or they are born like Jijabai, who is born to give a mission to a child. Yes.
Child and
rather than ambition. Yes.
Yeah, directing towards an purpose of life is something which is extremely important. and comes under the this thing of mother. There's one more question which is related to the topic. It's like, are all adversities divine will, even those that bring
Very
us
good question.
bring our lives to a pause, leave us feeling lost and
Well, this is a very good question. Are all adversities divine will or tests, something like that? Now, you see, if we think events and circumstances are arranged by the divine, जो होता है भगवान की मर्जी से, then we have to paint the divine as a monster. You know, because much happens in this world which is outright evil. But I don't want to go into trying to understand evil, because that's a subject in its own right and we can take up. So, one thing we must know, that in this world as it stands today, there is not the open will of the divine at play. So, a lot of things happen in this world, they are not the direct expression of the divine. If there was, world would be a wonderful place. Secondly, divine has no interest in testing us. He is us, he knows us, he's on our side. But there are many forces at play in the world other than divine in myself, and it is from them the challenge comes. This challenge, the so-called test or adversities, are allowed by the divine wisdom. Wisdom is one of the aspects of the divine. So this wisdom has allowed these challenges because they are soul's opportunities. But there is love which supersedes wisdom, the divine love. So, on one side, the wisdom aspect of the divine allows us these challenges, tests, adversities. On the other side, the divine love leans into creation, helps us, supports us through these challenges and navigate through it. So, it's not that divine will creates adversity, far from it. Divine wants us never to suffer. In fact, the mother says love for suffering is a morbid thing. He wants us to be happy, but we do not listen to the divine will. That is why we have suffering. It's just the other way around. If we really listen to the divine will, what the divine wants, if we just read the Gita, let's say, or the Buddha, any of these we pick up, what has the divine expressed to them? If you are attached to desire and ignorance, you will suffer. So divine will has always said that be freed from these things. But precisely because we do not obey the divine will, that we suffer. So it's the other way around. Divine will is for joy and beauty and love in creation, but there is a way to it, because there is a process. It cannot happen automatically. Now, if we don't want to go through the process, then we will be in this mode of existence. So, the process means effort and progress. If we don't want to do that, automatically it should be like a paradise, it won't happen. Even paradise will not be paradise, because there also we'll compete with somebody else. So,
that's one strategy which a teacher has asked, that sometimes we have overprotective mothers. So how do we help these mothers to realize that this is going to make the child weak?
okay. So, strategy, I wish I had one up my sleeve. Strategy for the mother who is overprotective, and how to explain to her that this is going to make the child weak. So, the only thing is, which I keep on repeating, that educating a child is not enough. Educate the parents. And I must tell you, it's a very difficult task, much more difficult. But, educate through little leaflets where impersonally, see, when you personally call a teacher, a parent, and try to tell, you are making your child weak, then the ego becomes defensive. But you have noticed in a classroom or some common problems, so there should be a kind of a monthly newsletter or something, where very impersonally you say, ki when we do this, children become weak. So impersonal jnana is much more easier for people to accept and follow than something which is said, you know what, you are making your child weak. Shut off. That's how they are. I mean, human beings are. So it should go in a packaged in a form that can change the person. But as I always say, not everything can be cured or healed. So ours is task to do, and like a nishkam karma, and then leave it to destiny. Yeah. Yeah.
So on behalf of the MIS family and everyone who was a part of this talk today, I express my heartfelt gratitude to Alok Bhai. His talks always give us a new perspective and insight into things. Adversity does not spare any human being, but how can we make it a stepping stone to inner growth and deal with it in a progressive and peaceful way is in our hands. Thank you, Alok Bhai, for helping us understand this. Thank you everyone for joining the session. And this making divine your companion is the key which I'm going to take with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bhai.